Good morning and welcome to your new day. Allison is off. Erica Hill joins me. Today is a major day in the Mueller investigation. And you know what? The president seems to know it. Check out his Twitter feed if you have time, because he's on a rampage right now. 4 tweets over the last 25 minutes, all about the Mueller investigation, going after Mueller personally, going after people involved in the investigation, going after Rod Rosenstein. Why is he doing this? Well, in just a matter of hours, we will know more, potentially much more, about where the investigations, plural, stand. 2 sentencing memos will detail the extent of Michael Cohen's cooperation. Key question here, what has he been telling them about the president's business ties to Russia? The Mueller team will also file a document spelling out the lies that they say Paul Manafort told them, lies that sunk his plea deal. One of the questions here, was he lying about things having to do with the Trump campaign and Russia? There's more. CNN has learned in the days before Mueller was appointed and right after James Comey was fired, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and top FBI officials discussed ways to rein in President Trump. Those options included Rosenstein wearing a wire, which he later denied. The sources say, and then this is big, that then acting FBI Director Andy McCabe took the extraordinary step of opening an obstruction of justice investigation.
Also, President Trump today is expected to name State Department spokeswoman and former Fox News host Heather Nauert as the new U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She would, of course, replace Nikki Haley in that role. Questions this morning about her qualifications for that job. And an Oscar stunner overnight, comedian Kevin Hart stepping down now as host of the Academy Awards only 2 days after he got the job. The reason? Well, he initially refused a demand from the Academy to apologize for his past anti-gay tweets, similar to statements he's made in comedy routines. It's an uproar in Hollywood, and it has plenty of people talking this morning.
We're going to start, though, on the Mueller investigation, because this really is one of those rare days where we know that by the end of the day, we're going to know more than we know right now. Joining us now is Michael Isikoff, chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News and co-author of Russian Roulette, Inside Story of Putin's War on America and the Election of Donald Trump. Phil Mudd, former FBI senior intelligence advisor and CNN counterterrorism analyst, and CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey, I want to start with you because the president is on this rampage this morning, 4 tweets in running, going all after the Mueller investigation and Rosenstein. There is absolutely no reason to dissect the words inside the tweets. However, I think the fact that he's doing it tells us he might be nervous. What does he have to be nervous about today?
Well, every time Robert Mueller has disclosed substantive findings of what he has discovered in his investigation, we have learned important new things. And here, there are 2 very significant disclosures coming, as long as they're not redacted too much. One is, what did Michael Cohen really tell him? What's the full measure of his cooperation? And the second, in many ways the most interesting, is how does Robert Mueller know that Paul Manafort lied to him so much? What are the other facts he uncovered that allowed him to conclude that Manafort was a liar? These are substantive areas of disclosures, but we should get them.
So substantive area, we'll see what we end up getting. A lot of us, everybody's trying to read between the, it's been pointed out, the liberal use of toner, of course, in the Flynn filing. And one of the things I know, Michael, that you've pointed out is what's reflected in there is likely not the meat, obviously, of what Mueller may have learned, specifically when it comes to obstruction of justice. So based just on that, there's still so much to find out.
Sure. Look, in the Flynn memo, it talked about the criminal cases that he has provided information for. But there's that whole other phase of the Mueller investigation, which is obstruction, which is not clear that that is leading towards a criminal case, because the ultimate target in an obstruction case is the president himself. He's the one that fired Comey. He's the one that asked Comey to let Mike Flynn go. I hope you can see fit to let him go. And under DOJ policy, Mueller cannot bring a criminal case against the sitting president. That's been DOJ policy for quite some time. So the only thing Mueller can do with that information is put it into a report that at some point may go to the Congress. That's, there are lots of questions about that. So in the upcoming memos, I would, especially with the Manafort, there could be matters relating to obstruction where there are communications between the White House and Manafort, Manafort's lawyers. There's been reporting on that. So that could be something that Mueller is looking at, but I'm not sure that's going to make its way into the memo we're likely to see tonight.
And I just also want to add that we're going to learn about Michael Cohen, and we know that Michael Cohen has pleaded guilty to arranging Russian deals for the president during the campaign, well into the campaign. Michael Cohen says that under the president's direction, he made illegal payments having to do with Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, whom said they had relationships with the president. There's all that. There's all areas which we could learn more about today. On obstruction, Phil, it's very interesting. CNN's reporting last night, to me, struck me as, oh, that's curious, when we learned that after James Comey was fired and before Robert Mueller was hired as special counsel, Andy McCabe, who was deputy FBI director, acting FBI director at the time, actually opened an official obstruction of justice investigation. What does that tell you?
Boy, it tells me that at the time that Comey was departing when he was fired by the president, remember the time before that, you had all the turmoil at the Department of Justice and the FBI about the Clinton investigation leading up to the elections in fall of 2016, that there was so much turmoil at the FBI that they look at a president who's only been around for a few months and consider a major criminal charge. I think the bar for obstruction of justice, we've talked about it for a long time, is going to be extremely high. What this tells me is more about the nature of how the FBI and maybe the Department of Justice were looking at the president in the initial months about the swirl around Comey than it does about the president himself. My bottom line, John, is I look at this and say, boy, they must have been extremely nervous, uncomfortable at the FBI to have taken this step. That is a huge step.
It is a huge step, and I think it just underlines the magnitude of how disturbed people were by what the president was doing. I mean, Comey has testified and written about this in great detail about, all this pressure he was getting from the president, demanding loyalty, go easy on Mike Flynn. It was wildly inappropriate. Comey knew it. The other people at the FBI knew it. All of us, we've heard about it for so long. This is old news for us now. But the magnitude of it is still worth dwelling on. It was really bad what the president was doing, and they all knew it.
Michael?
Yeah, I would say, look, the facts here have been known for quite some time, since like February of last year. And, what's stunning to me is here we are, nearly 2 years later, and we haven't had a full airing of what happened. This is a subject that Congress should have taken up in public long ago with open hearings, with the key witnesses testifying before the TV cameras under oath, and the Mueller report on this should have been out a long time ago. There were a discrete set of actions taken in a short period of time in the first month or so of Donald Trump's presidency. It doesn't take 2 years to uncover the facts on those. All of the key witnesses could have been questioned, should have testified in public by now, and we should have answers on all these matters by now.
Except for one. I mean, Brother Mike is exactly right that we should know more about this. But the fact that the president's lawyers managed to stretch out the whole debate over whether the president will answer questions from Mueller, and he still hasn't answered questions about those obstruction issues, this is sort of Hamlet without the prince in terms of obstruction of justice. He's never answered questions under oath about what went on when he fired Comey, and it looks like he never will.
And he likely never will. And I think that could have been predicted a long time ago. And so then what do you do from there? You take the facts you do have, you take the witnesses you do have, and move forward.
There is one more aspect to it, that even after those first few months, which, Michael, you say should have been investigated more quickly, there were more instances which raised new questions, such as after it came to light the Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr., where he was promised Russian dirt on Hillary Clinton, the fact that the president dictated the memo, which was misleading at a minimum, dishonest at worst, about what went on at that meeting. So there's more fodder, perhaps, that they have to investigate. Maybe they were done investigating February and March, but all of a sudden they've got to deal with July, August, and September on those things.
Yeah, look, there's no question this is a complex investigation with lots of threads. But I think the fact that we're seeing these memos today is an indicator we are coming towards an end game. Usually, cooperating witnesses don't have their sentencing until after all the information they've provided to the government has been processed and used for any further criminal cases. So, we'll be looking very closely tonight to see how the language is worded. Do they use words like substantial assistance to an ongoing investigation for Michael Cohen? That'll be especially revealing. They did in the Flynn case, but not in, and this is very important, in the Flynn memo, the substantial assistance to an ongoing investigation referred to a matter not under Robert Mueller's mandate, not related to the Russia investigation.
Right. And I know, Phil, you've said in the past, too, the one word you just said Russia, Michael, the one word you're really looking for, hopefully today, if it's not redacted, is Russia in any of these documents, because specifically Paul Manafort's, because as you point out, Phil, that could tell us a lot.
That's right. I mean, I'm most closely following what Manafort documents say today for that simple reason. We know 3 of the 4 pieces of this. We know from the Mueller investigation what the Russians were up to. We know that Americans involved with the campaign, including Paul Manafort and his deputy, were deeply involved in dirty money. We know everybody and his brother is lying in this investigation, but we still don't know the key question of whether something not only inappropriate but illegal was done in terms of the campaign accepting information, for example, from WikiLeaks about Russia. Why would Manafort lie? We already know that he's been convicted on dirty money. The only reason I can think he's lying is he still has something else to hide, and that's Russia. I want to see what that document on Manafort says about anything he has to do with Russia.
All right, Phil, Michael, Jeffrey, thanks all for being with us. I'll only say it one more time. Sometimes when the president is most angry in the morning, it portends that perhaps he has a tip that he's going to have something to be upset about that goes public later in the day. So stay tuned.
There you go. Sort of like a crystal ball.
Sort of like.
Or a magic 8-ball.
Both magic,
yeah.
A magic crystal 8-ball.
A wild week on Wall Street after the arrest of a Chinese executive helped to fuel fears of to appear in court later today, facing extradition to the United States. Joining us to discuss, former Trump economic advisor and CNN senior economics analyst Stephen Moore and Washington Post opinion columnist Catherine Rampell. Good to have both of you with us. So as this news broke, and we started to learn more about the details, one of the things that came out, Catherine, is that all of this was happening as President Trump and President Xi were meeting in Argentina. And we've been told by the administration, we've been told that the president didn't know what was happening at the time. Stephen, do you believe that the president wasn't in on this? And how important would it have been for him to know? What could that have changed?
Well, apparently from the news reports, he did not know while these negotiations were going on about this arrest. Why is it important? Because I think it further confirms that China is very difficult to deal with. They don't play by the rules. They lie, they cheat, they steal. I mean, look, I don't know whether these allegations against this woman are true or not, but there's been a pattern here. And I think what happened this week is that the White House, from my White House sources, they sort of thought they had a handshake deal with China, and then as soon as the Chinese got back to Beijing, they started backtracking from that deal, and then of course the stock market collapsed by 1,000 points. And it's so important to get this back on track. I think that this is just an indication of what happens if these negotiations fail. On the other hand, the upside of this, if Donald Trump can get this deal done and the Chinese open up their markets to us and stop stealing $300 billion of our technology a year, the upside for the stock market and the economy are so high. So this is a huge high-stake game of poker that's going on right now.
It is a high-stakes game of poker. Is this the right tactic, Catherine?
If you're talking about tariffs, I think the answer is no. China has definitely committed great transgressions against the United States, against our allies in terms of stealing IP, forced technology transfer, huge subsidies to state-owned enterprises, closing off its markets. The question here is, what are the right tools that are available to pressure China to start behaving? And the tools that, in my view, and in the view of most economists that I've spoken with who focus on trade, is to get together with our allies who have also been similarly victimized and to force pressure on China to reform. And these are very complicated structural reforms, so it's going to be challenging no matter what. But putting tariffs on China and sort of triggering these retaliations against American firms is not going to get the deal done. It's going to cause lots of pain to American firms, to American consumers, because American firms, of course, are the ones who are going to have to pay higher prices and who are being shut out of Chinese markets. So I do not think this is the right route to getting what we want. And part of the problem here is not only what are the tools available, but what are our objectives. And, I've talked about a lot of the issues that we have with China. The things that Trump focuses on, unfortunately, are not those issues. He's focused on the trade deficit, which is not in and of itself the main problem here.
When we
look, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I don't disagree with that. Of course, if we could get our allies on board, it would do a lot of good in terms of isolating China. So that's right. I think the question that I would have to these economists who say this isn't the right approach is, how are you going to get China to behave themselves? Now, look, we've had tariffs on, and look, I'm a free trade guy. I don't like the word tariffs. I don't like it when Donald Trump calls himself tariff man. But on the other hand, we've tried the carrot of trade deals and so on for 20 years with China. Yeah, we pulled out of
TPP. That TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
I'm talking about with respect to China. I'm talking about
the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But that was
China
the point.
Wasn't even part of TPP.
I know, that was the point. It was that we were getting together with our allies, these other countries who were similarly victimized, and using that to pressure China. We pulled out of that trade deal.
Yeah, but my point is this, that, we've had these tariffs now for many months now on China, and it is hurting their economy. There's no question about it. I mean,
and ours
this is the untold story. That China's industrial production has been really cut significantly this year. Their stock market's down 20%. Trump is using the club of tariffs to try to get Beijing to behave. And Catherine, I think my problem with what you're saying is this approach hasn't really worked very well. We've got to start using other tools to get China to behave, because we can't go on with them stealing from us every year
we're punishing
and running these huge deficits.
The issue is that we're punishing China, but we're also punishing our own companies.
Well, that's true.
We're also punishing our own consumers. I mean, if you look at the kinds of things that we've put tariffs on, it's largely products that American firms that rely on global supply chains purchase. So they're the ones who are suffering, not to mention, of course, farmers and manufacturers who are suffering from retaliatory tariffs. You look at soybean farmers. China was the biggest export market for American soybean farmers, and that's been essentially shut off. The exports are down something like 95% over the past year to China. I mean, and that's largely due to these tariffs. Other factors as well, of course. So American firms, American consumers are hurting because of all of this. So it's very much a misdirected attack.
Well, I think at some point we're going to have the showdown. I mean, look, this is the issue of our time, about what country is going to be the sort of economic superpower for the next 20 and 50 years. Will it be the United States, which I certainly hope it will, or will it be China? And China has gained economic advantage by incredibly abusive trade practices in the United States. And I think it's like we've been, as Trump says, we've had a kick-me sign on ourselves for the last 20 years. And China's been allowed to cheat and steal with impunity. And now we finally got a president who is kind of striking back. And you're right. There's going to be collateral damage here.
But the problem is he's striking back against our own companies, our own consumers. I agree that China has misbehaved. I think we agree on that point. Mm-hmm. The question is first of all, is Trump focusing on the right issue? And it doesn't seem like he is. He's focused mostly on deficits. He's not focused on these other kinds of issues like forced technology transfer. And also, is he actually using using tools that will be effective. And when I was talking earlier about banding together with our allies, it's not only by pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that we have alienated those allies who would be quite useful in this fight, of course. It's also picking trade wars with them as well. We've picked trade wars with Canada, with Mexico. We still have steel and aluminum tariffs on both of those countries. We've picked fights with Japan, with the EU, with Korea, with all of these countries that should be enlisted in this fight against China.
You're right, but but look, this what's happened in the last 6 to 9 months actually proves that a lot of what Trump is doing is working. I mean, look at how Canada basically. Well, look, Canada basically relented in terms of remember Trump said, look, we're going to either slap you with 25% auto tariffs or you're going to reduce our tariffs, your tariffs on our dairy products and other things, and it worked, and we got this deal done in an effective way.
We got substantially the same deal that we would have gotten before. This was like cosmetic. There was like cosmetic improvements to NAFTA that probably we would have gotten anyway without picking this fight with our allies, without alienating some of our closest friends.
Let me just bring us back to China for a minute here, because part of what I want to get in is the president obviously tweeting last night. The president is happy where things stand, tweeting that the teams on both sides are having smooth communication and good cooperation with each other. We're full of confidence and agreement can be reached within the next 90 days. I agree. That coming at 7:56 p.m. Obviously, what we're hearing from China is far different. In fact, an editorial in the Global Times noting that the government there should seriously mull over the U.S. tendency to abuse legal procedures to suppress China's high-tech enterprise and increase interaction with the U.S. and exert pressure when necessary. How much of a concern is that, specifically for companies and large tech companies that may be doing business in China? Could this lead to retaliation that could, in fact, be harmful, Stephen?
Well, the problem is, I mean, you put your finger on it. The problem is China won't even acknowledge that they are stealing technology. Now, they put out a statement earlier this week that they are going to, have more severe penalties on intellectual property, but nobody really believes that. I mean, there's a big problem with credibility in terms of dealing with China. It's very much like dealing with the old Soviet Union. You've got to use the Reagan principle here of not just trust, but verify. When this deal gets done, and look, I'm optimistic, actually, that a deal will get done in 90 days, because China can't survive a 25% tariff on everything they bring into the United States. Their warehouses, their docks are just full of merchandise they can't sell right now. They need access to American markets. But we've got to make sure not just that it's written down and there's a handshake deal, but there's real enforcement that China, actually abides by what they agree to.
Catherine, real quick, you have last word.
I agree that the issue is getting China to make these structural reforms and having measures in place to check that that they are actually abiding by whatever the agreement is. I am less optimistic that we will get to that point, especially within the next 90 days, given that it doesn't seem like the groundwork necessary to make that happen has been in place.
Catherine, Stephen, appreciate it. Thank you both. John?
Thank you.
All right, Eric, I appreciate it. President Trump has a leading candidate to be the next attorney general, someone who has been critical of. CNN has learned that President Trump has a leading candidate to be the next attorney general, or at least one he wants to nominate, William Barr, who had the job before under the late President George H.W. Bush. So what are his chances of being confirmed? Joining me now is someone who has a vote on this, the Democratic senator from the state of Hawaii, Mazie Hirono. She serves on the Judiciary Committee. Senator Hirono, thank you so much for being with us. Aloha, as you like to say.
Aloha.
Let me just get your first reaction to the news of William Barr being the leading candidate for the president to nominate for Attorney General. Is he someone you could support?
I would have a hard time doing that, because here's another person who auditioned for the job by catching President Trump's attention by talking about how Hillary Clinton should continue to be investigated and questioning the Mueller investigation. So with President Trump, he looks for people who are going to protect him, who are going to cover for him. And there are two things that are important to this president very clearly. One is protecting himself and making money. And so here's a person who auditioned for the job. We already have somebody who's on the job, and that is our Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who I voted for after I questioned him about whether he would resign if the president ever asked him to do anything unethical or illegal.
Let me just, what Senator Hirono was talking about is that William Barr has defended the firing of James Comey. He's been critical of the political donations by some on the Mueller team and has supported an investigation into some issues surrounding the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton. William Barr has made those public statements. On the other hand, Senator Hirono, Senator Patrick Leahy, a senior member on your committee, said of Barr, "He's a man I've always respected. The best thing the administration could do is get somebody who would have majority support from Republicans and Democrats alike for Attorney General. Those are the best attorneys general." He was asked, could he get that? And Senator Leahy responded, yes, he could. Barr is someone who's been confirmed before by the Senate.
That's true. But on the other hand, these are not normal times. What's happening is we have a president who just cares about appointing people who are going to do his bidding, and that is not what we need as an attorney general. And by the way, the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein was also confirmed in a bipartisan way in the U.S. Senate. So we already have somebody like that who's doing the job and who should be the next attorney general, not Whitaker and not this person who's being touted and pushed forward.
This
That's
person,
my
again,
opinion.
this person is William Barr, former Attorney General of the United States. Just to give him a name, while we're talking about confirmations, CNN has also learned that the president is expected to nominate Heather Nauert, who is currently a spokesperson at the State Department, to be the next ambassador to the United Nations. Could you support her nomination?
I would have difficulty because there are those of us who actually care about people's experience and qualifications. And I do not know that being loyal to the president is the uppermost qualification. It is for the president, but it isn't for me. I think it shows very clearly that the president has great difficulty in finding people, not the people who are going to kowtow to him, but finding people who are actually experienced and qualified for the jobs that they're being put forward. And by the way, when I talk about the need for certain appointments to be made, we know that we've been in Afghanistan for 17 years now, and we now have an ambassador to Afghanistan, but we do not have an ambassador to Pakistan, to Saudi Arabia, some of these other countries that we were only briefed yesterday and the day before in the Armed Services Committee, that these are countries that need to be very much involved with us in bringing about a reconciliation in Afghanistan.
No question there are a great number of vacancies. One of the things we've heard in regards to Heather Nauert as a possible ambassador to the United Nations is that Secretary Pompeo, National Security Advisor John Bolton, who actually had that job before, they support diminishing its stature in the sense that it might not be a cabinet position any longer. It's gone back and forth over the years. Do you think that would be something that would be okay?
I think that certainly comports with where John Bolton is and some of the others are, because they would like to be unfettered and whatever positions they want to take. The United Nations is a place where we actually have to have behave in a diplomatic way with other countries, and that seems to be a huge challenge for this administration. So I'm not surprised that they'd like to diminish that position. I would not be supportive of such a move.
All right, we got you on the record on 2 votes you might very well have to take in the coming weeks and months. Senator Mazie Hirono, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Aloha.
Aloha to you.
Kevin Hart is out as host of the Oscars. What he now says about past statements, things he said were jokes, which cost him that prestigious job.
But first, it's the time of the year when we honor some of the best humanity has to offer. CNN heroes. Join Anderson Cooper and Kelly Ripa as they announce the 2018 CNN Hero of the Year live this Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on CNN.
We're humans helping humans, and they need our help.
We are truly giving the gift of mobility.
They're the best the world has to offer.
We're building something that matters a lot more than we do.
They're heroes today and every day. You could be the
This is nice. What did you use for this?